Hey everybody, it's Zach here. Welcome back to Clapperboard, where I'll be doing another movie review. This time I'm going to be reviewing Pork Pie. Pork Pie stars Dean O'Gorman, James Rolleston, Asleight Cummings, and Antonia Prebble. It's directed by Matt Murphy, and it revolves around John Hardy, a failed writer and a down-on-luck New Zealander who wishes to reunite with his ex-wife. So when trying to hitch a ride to Wellington, he ends up unknowingly pairing up with an outlaw, Luke Anafara. And from then on, it's car chases, train rides, and all sorts of drama as John heads down to Invercargill to apologise for his wrongdoings. Okay guys, before I start this review, I would just like to say that Pork Pie is actually a remake of a film called Goodbye Pork Pie, which came out in, I believe it was 1981. Pork Pie and the original Goodbye Pork Pie were New Zealand films, and for those of you guys who don't know, I live in New Zealand, so this is the type of film that I really like to watch in theatres, because it's really kind of a special experience for me. Because you're watching a film from your home country, and it's being filmed on location in your home country. So I was really looking forward to Pork Pie, because the trailers had showed something really interesting, really fun, and other New Zealand films that I had watched before, I really enjoyed. You know, about a week ago I watched Boy, directed by the genius Taika Waititi, which I thought was very good. I watched Taika Waititi's other film, Hunt for the Wilderpeople, which was also very good. Of course, the Lord of the Rings films are masterpieces, and that's why Pork Pie was a really special experience for me, because it was me knowing that this was coming from my country. So to sum it all up, basically, Pork Pie was a funny, witty, enjoyable, exciting film that did have its fair share of flaws, but overall I really enjoyed it. One of the first things that immediately stood out to me in Pork Pie was its humour. The script for this movie was incredibly witty, it was very cleverly written. Matt Murphy, who wrote and directed the movie, I personally think he's a very talented guy from this film. He clearly knows how to make something enjoyable, he clearly knows how to make it engaging, and that was one of the great things about this movie, is because it was really engaging. You care about the characters, you care about this trio of outlaws who are running away from the police, going through all sorts of crazy situations, and you feel the experience through the acting. The acting in this film was also very good. It was very convincing. You believe what is happening on screen. Among many of the things that I did enjoy in this movie, several of the things that really stood out to me were the cinematography and the soundtrack. The cinematography was very nice. You had close-ups when they were appropriate. Whenever there was an action sequence, it was done in wide shots when it needed to be. I really liked the soundtrack for this movie because it was composed of various different New Zealand songs, like Dave Dobbin, you know, I'm pretty sure there was Split Enz, you know, all of those New Zealand bands. There were a lot of New Zealand songs. Another one of the things in the movie that I really liked were the chase sequences. And at the end of the first act of this movie, there was a really wild and intense chase scene through the streets of Wellington, where our main character, played by Dean O'Gorman, is in this sort of like coffin atop the car, and he's like asleep at this point, and he wakes up and he's on the roof of this car as the car is being driven through the streets of the city. And it's just like a really wild escape sequence. They go through the streets of Wellington, to the train station, onto a train. You know, it's a pretty intense and very cleverly made chase sequence. And one of the things which made it really engaging for me in particular was because, for those of you guys who are unaware, I live in the Wellington area. Wellington is essentially, it's my city. I was born there, it's where I've grown up. And watching this chase sequence throughout the streets of my hometown, essentially, was just a really, really weird and very exciting experience, because I remember when they actually shut down portions of the city to film Pork Pie, and not just Pork Pie, but they also went to film The Ghost in the Shell, which is coming out in a couple of months, and I'm definitely going to review that when it comes out. So I remember when they were actually filming this movie in Wellington, and so watching all of that come together in this really dramatic and dynamic chase sequence was just really exciting. However, no movie is without flaw, and Pork Pie does have a couple of flaws. First of all, I actually haven't watched the original Goodbye Pork Pie, but from the reviews that have been coming out about the movie, they say that it's not quote-unquote as spiced up as the original film was. One of the first problems I had with the movie is when John and Luke first meet up on this highway, and Luke has got the car, and John is basically trying to walk all the way from the top of New Zealand down to Wellington, which is like, it would take days to get there, I tell you. And basically Luke says something like, "Ugh, if you keep walking down this road, you're gonna be mincemeat." And John says, "Well, I need to get down to Wellington for a wedding. Can I come with you?" And Luke says, "Oh yeah, sure." And John just sort of hops in the car, and they drive off. And that is basically their introduction in a nutshell. And I was like, okay, that was pretty quick. You know, it was just came off as a scene that kind of felt a bit rushed, and, you know, could have definitely been stretched out a little more. Another one of the emotional storylines that was thrown into the movie was that John is supposed to be basically a failed novelist. He's supposed to be writing a book, but he can't write the book. And so basically, that is supposed to be like, he's failed at basically what he wants to do. He wants to be a writer, but he can't write. The problem is, we don't see his book. We have no idea what the plot of the book is. We don't know exactly how bad it is. All we know is that he wrote a book, and we're supposed to care that he can't write this book. And so, therefore, it was very hard to feel invested in that particular storyline when we know, like, relatively little about it. I also thought that at some point in the movie, the pacing was a bit uneven, because the reason why John wanted to go down to Wellington was because he wanted to catch up with his ex-wife at the wedding that she was going to, and the wedding scene took about 1 minute, and it's like, well, we just got down to Wellington to see this wedding and to see his ex-wife, and yet it only takes about 1 minute of screen time. Basically, the rest of the scenes in Wellington mostly take up this club scene, this nightclub scene, and that car chase that I just mentioned before. I'm also not going to give too much away, but there's a character who appears later on in the movie, but they abandon his character quite, like, almost as soon as he appears. He only gets, like, about 3 minutes of screen time, and he's just there to sort of up the stakes, really, so he's kind of more of a plot device than a character we're supposed to take seriously. So I thought that was a bit of a missed opportunity bringing his character in there, because it was kind of just an excuse to move the plot forward a little bit more. However, all of these flaws sort of kind of fade away once the ending comes into fruition, because the ending was intense. He needs to, and I'm not going to give away too much, but he needs to get to his ex-wife in Invercargill. He's speeding in his car, trying to get away from the police, and at this point, it's sort of like a national manhunt. It's basically like a national manhunt for this trio of outlaws who are trying to get to Invercargill in their car, and so at this point, the whole story has been building to this amazingly intense climax where he's speeding in his car to Invercargill, trying to get there in time, and it was just like a really intense sequence. It was like a chase sequence, and then at the very end of the film, it's kind of like a romance, and then at the very end of the film, you get that sort of feel-good feeling, and I'm not going to give away too much, but overall, the ending just kind of brought the film mostly home for me, which I was really happy with. So overall, Pork Pie was a flawed but fun experience. I really enjoyed my time with it, and while I was picking out problems here and there, overall it was just a really feel-good, fun film, which could be intense, it could be emotional, but most of all, it was just witty, funny, cleverly written, and overall, it was a really great experience for me in theatres. And therefore, I'm going to give Pork Pie 3.5 out of 5. So guys, thank you so much for watching. If you managed to catch Pork Pie in theatres, please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, as your opinions really mean a lot to me. I'll hopefully see you in another video very soon. Until then though, take care.